Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Education and Communication Subcommittee meeting. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look and brainstorming at some of our indicators. But first, I want to ask that Kofi, if you could make a motion to pass our minutes from last time.
How do I get that started?
You just say, I
Um,
motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
And then Audrey, could you second it?
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, so I think it just automatically passes then, so since it's just you two. First, I want to ask, is there anything that you guys want to talk about? Anything you guys want to bring up, have a conversation about? Can be anything.
Nothing from me.
Okay. So this week, obviously at our last community task force meeting, we went over our aspirational goals and presented them to the group at large to get some feedback. At our next meeting, we're going to be presenting our indicators, but it's just the first time around, so they don't have to be formal or fully formed yet. So I figured that today would be a good opportunity for us to at least get the ball moving in that direction. All right, so our first priority area is public engagement. And our first aspirational goal is communications and outreach. City should work to continuously understand the communal diversity within Dublin while promoting a welcoming environment by building relationships and trust. These bullet points are just some placeholders that we had based off of our conversations in the very beginning. So they're absolutely not representative of what we're doing moving forward. So I wanted to ask, do you guys have any ideas on how the city can actively communicate effectively with diverse communities within Dublin? What are some actionable steps or ideas that you may have? And so for reference, I'm going to stop sharing my page and I'm going to share this instead. This is Beaverton's communication area. So they talk about city marketing materials depicting people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, genders, and abilities. Number of translated city print. We don't have a city newspaper. We have Dublin Life. We contract. I looked into that today. We contract with an outside team, and they do that. So I'm not sure as to what we can do within that realm, but they make sure that there's multilingual content within their publication. Um, Marketing materials using different communication channels and priority languages, and key navigational signage in and around the city buildings, updated to increase the use of icons, multilingual and gender neutral language, which I thought was interesting and rather important. So do you think any of these could be used within the city of Dublin and maybe Dublinized, for lack of a better term, and make a positive impact?
I definitely like that last one that I thought was pretty interesting, where it talked about like updating like icons and adding like gender neutral language and stuff. I feel like that's pretty important, especially for like youth now who like want to feel more like accepted and like who they are. And I feel like, you know, um, updating things so that it's more like welcoming and like representative of those students will like help them like accept themselves and like feel like they belong better in the community.
Absolutely. So you're speaking specifically to using inclusive language on city signs and city assets throughout the community.
Yeah, for sure.
When I was taking a look at this, I thought that that should probably extend to city materials as well. So any documents, press releases, video content that we do should use inclusive language.
Yeah, that and as well as do we tend to do those things in like different languages too? Because like it mentioned like distributing it in like Spanish and English and like having different languages.
So not to my knowledge. Unfortunately, Lindsay is not with us tonight and she is in the communications department. Homework for me, I will talk with her and get an inventory of all the things that we do within that realm. But I'm glad you brought that up and it was something that I was thinking about and preparing for tonight. Just because we do something doesn't mean that you guys shouldn't recommend that we do it because that will hold us to it into the future and it will make us accountable to ensure that that remains the status quo.
For me, I believe the numbers 2 to 5 are very important because Dublin, I forget her name, but she works at Dublin City Schools and she's a
Sylvina.
translator. Sylvina, yes. She said how there's parents who don't speak English that they don't use traditional Facebook, Twitter, traditional formats of communication. They have different forms of communication that they rely on. If the city of Dublin were to make sure to get important information out to those types of communication channels, that's very important. Um, Also, I feel like putting information out to the city that resonates with different groups that is important to different groups. For example, the Chinese New Year, like getting that out, even talking about that reaches out to the Chinese population in Dublin. So pretty much the different groups in Dublin put out information that resonates with the group, and then also I feel like points 2 to 5 are very important and doable.
Absolutely. And I think you made a really good point about Chinese Lunar New Year, for instance. Um, it's not just about translating Dublin content to other languages. It's about having diverse content in general and uplifting those events and those efforts in the community. Also, having it in multiple languages helps.
So going back to our presentation, we could say something along the lines of, for what was it, communication and outreach, we could say something like, wait, what was the question again for communication and outreach?
So what we're supposed to be reviewing and going over.
Yeah.
So each of these each of these bullet points are just placeholders for now. We need to have specific calls to action or measurable steps. So for instance, if you want to, what was one of the ones that we said?
Diverse material.
Yes, so the city provides official city statements, releases, and news in several different languages. So that's an action item. You either do it or you don't. So
I like that. And then also the next one would be the city reevaluates the city reevaluates its communication channels to make sure it is reaching its racial demographic in Dublin.
absolutely. It's a really good point. Dana and I had a meeting with a couple of prominent members of the Chinese community in Dublin. And they have a WeChat group that has over 450 residents in it that the city didn't know about. And that we're now getting involved in and using it as an opportunity to gauge feedback from that community that otherwise we may not have heard from. So that's a really good point. What about we also mentioned diversifying City of Dublin content. I like to think of it as amplifying voices. Is that one that you guys would be interested in including?
Yeah, so like diversifying content, like in what way do you mean?
Sure. So for instance, have you guys ever seen Dublin News in 90, Dublin News 90? It's like it's just a one-off story that's 90 seconds of video content that uplifts something that's happening in the community. I would love for that to be focused throughout the year on diversity and things happening within the community of within the diverse communities within Dublin and uplift those stories so that other people get engaged.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's important. Because like representation matters. Like some people like see that and they'll like feel like their voices are being heard too. And then that can like help educate other people to like learn about the diversity within our community. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
How would you word that, or what would the like the bullet point for that be?
So I wrote down earlier, the city will seek opportunities to amplify voices and communities through official City of Dublin content. For example, Dublin News in 90.
Okay.
And then so we also have statements, releases, and news in several languages. What about electoral information? You know, a big piece of the other aspect of what we're working on in community building is getting people engaged in our local electoral process.
Yeah, definitely like diversifying and including more languages and stuff for like voting information will help a lot of people like if they didn't really understand it before, like if we make it more available to more people, then that can help get more people like involved in the local voting process.
I think for that specific topic, this is when you would want to really recruit almost group leaders in the community to become knowledgeable in it, because news, specifically like pertaining to government and boring topics, it can resonate different with different groups when you have like some pretty much someone who is similar to you telling you about it. It's one thing for the city to tell a group of people like, hey, this is what's going on, this and that. But when you have someone in that group, for example, like Vincent, when you have Vincent go back to the Chinese group chat and tell them like, hey, this is why this is important to us, it's completely different. So to pretty much sum up what I'm saying is, I feel like it would be more effective to recruit and get the different racial groups in Dublin involved in government, politics, all that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of what you just said is going to go into our like leadership development and diversifying government aspirational goals. But I think a key part of what you said is leveraging community leaders to expand government messaging, to expand the impact of government messaging. So I think that's a really good step that the city can do is to start leveraging community partners to really get that message across.
Because, for example, there'll be a time period where Dublin might release a lot of information throughout the year. Residents, they'll tune it out eventually. So that's why it's important to have a key figure that you trust involved in involved in the information, so they can come back and tell you, like, hey, this one's really important. This is why we need to be focused on it.
Absolutely. Another one that Beaverton had that was kind of interesting is they called for the city to increase the number of interpreters at city events that are available. I don't think I've ever seen an interpreter at a city event.
Me either. I'm trying to think. I haven't seen. Are we talking about like language and sign language, or pretty much both? I haven't seen either. I don't see how that can hurt.
You're right. I haven't seen either at anything. I
That's
think that would.
definitely useful. I know growing up through the Dublin education system, there's people who don't speak English. They have to go through ESL, and because of their lack of understanding English, it can deter them from, getting involved or coming to or events. Sylvina touched on this beforehand. Um, as an interpreter, she pretty much said the same thing. So I don't see how it can hurt putting that in there. I actually believe it's important.
So I think that we hit some good points for communications and outreach today. I'll incorporate feedback into this slide, and then we'll touch on it again and really flesh out our ideas at our next meeting. So let's go to our next aspirational goal, and that's leadership development. The city must promote understanding of Dublin government and the community at large by recruiting diversity into leadership development and education efforts. We had talked about recruiting and sponsoring diversity into the Leadership Dublin program, and also Citizen University, Dublin Citizens Police Academy, and Washington Township Citizens Fire Academy. It's a mouthful. So those are some of the things that we had touched on before. I wanna jump over to the indicators from Beaverton and just take a look at what they do. Because I think that was helpful for our first time around. So the total number of Bold program alumni increases. I looked into that. It's kind of like our Leadership Dublin or Citizen U. City supports training for historically underrepresented communities on what it takes to run for a local election. What do you guys think of that?
I'm actually pretty glad that the Beaverton report had that, because I wanted to bring that up. I think it's time that if the city wants to increase the amount of racial representation they have in government throughout, I think they need some type of program similar to that that's dedicated to um, exposing young people of color to government practices. I think I think it's very necessary that the city tries to implement some type of program for that.
Yeah, and that just kind of helps, like what Kofi was saying earlier about getting more diversity in our like local offices in general. So if we're like supporting, if the city's supporting like training to get people involved for that, then I think like in turn that will get people in our local offices.
Absolutely. One thing that I really liked that Beaverton did is that under leadership development, it has specific calls for training. And then under reflective government, they go on to talk about how city boards and commission applicants' appointments and mentorship or membership rather are increasingly reflective of city. So it's like the training is the input and the reflective government indicators are the output. It's making sure that people actually then follow through and the city makes it so that there is a result of more diversity on these boards, commissions, and on council at large. So I think they really work well together.
I would recommend that pretty much one through four. It pretty much describes everything that I had previously said. I think we should really just double-nize 1 through 4 and adopt it.
Audrey, are you on board?
Yeah, I feel that. Also, the third one, does that kind of go with like the second one? Because the third one kind of talks about like including like, shadowing and mentoring programs. So I guess that could kind of go with the training aspect if it's all for like local office.
I thought, hi Vincent. I thought the
Guys,
same
sorry I'm
thing.
late.
No worries. I thought the same thing. I think the key distinction here is that number 2 is a program where you're going to go through a class. And I think number 3 is actually taking the time to invite somebody into your office and to show them what to do. And I think there's a difference in impact between the two, right? One is inviting somebody to the dance, and the other is actually dancing with them. You know what I mean? It's actually inclusionary. So do you guys feel comfortable with these 4?
Yeah, I'm on board with that, and Dublinizing it because like that first one, it would be like our equivalent of that. Yeah.
I am. Like you said, the purpose of this meeting isn't to it's more like brainstorming. So I feel like the next meeting, that's when we can, adjust it for our needs. Because right now I'm thinking of we could do 2 like sort of different approaches. One, like one program could be directed towards young people. The other program could be focused towards adults in the city who are looking to get exposed into government.
You're absolutely right. And you can get as specific as you want with these recommendations. And so when I put these into PowerPoint for our next meeting, I'll make sure to split those 2 up so that we can talk about it. Vincent, for reference, we are going through each of our aspirational goals that we decided on in our last meeting and presented to the task force. And then going through and brainstorming ideas for specific actions or indicators that we can take and that can be tracked to ensure that we accomplish those goals. And we are looking back on the Beaverton model to take a look at some of the things that they maybe did that we could adopt and adapt to the needs of our community.
This is great. I like it.
All right, so if we're good with leadership development, then let's move on. I left youth in here. I just wanted to run you guys kind of through what youth has decided to do. They've finished their aspirational goals and their indicators. And I just wanted to see if you guys had any feedback, but also for inspiration, this is kind of how they phrased things. So the city should treat the youth of Dublin as a relevant stakeholder, engaging and including representatives as much as possible. The city includes 4 positions on a future Dublin Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board that will be filled by 1 senior representative from each high school and 1 from the Emerald campus. Each member will represent schools within their high school tract alongside an informal deputy of junior standing to ensure succession planning. The city will work with Centero, the Dublin Rec Center, Dublin Arts Council, Dublin-based athletic teams and clubs, and Dublin City Schools to build and advertise diverse events and innovative approaches in an attempt to attract diverse interest and opportunities to engage youth in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and training. And then the city will work with school representatives to strategically engage with Dublin youth at city events, roundtables, and youth-dedicated town halls. And I'm sure that Audrey can answer all of your questions.
So is this what the youth subcommittee came up with?
Yes.
I really like the idea to engage youth, especially our high school students from each of the high school. That can add a lot of great insights and perspectives from our community, especially from younger folks. This is a great idea.
Yeah, that having the youth on like the advisory board, like having representatives for the youth that was like I know like Jamil and I were like kind of inspired by our superintendent's advisory committee where like they take people from each school so we can meet up and talk about what's going on in the schools. But this is like a little bigger scale with everyone, including Emerald Campus, so that we can like talk to city about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also it's a good experience for the youth as well for you to be able to engage with the adults, especially city leaders and the community leaders to basically to understand what they are thinking, can bring back their perspective to your group as well. Awesome, great idea. Thanks for coming up with that.
Kofi, it looks like you're about to come up with the next brilliant idea, so I'm just going to wait for you to digest that.
I'm good. Yeah, reading through, I really like it. And yeah, I like these bullet points. Now, so this will be like more like community engagement. What about from a school standpoint? Would you guys engage with like school officials as well? Or do you have one at the third bullet point? Okay.
What I was thinking about would be with the first bulletin. My first thing is we haven't had concrete discussion about the advisory board yet. So I'm only hesitant because we just haven't ironed out or planned out how many, what we want the advisory board to look like. That's the only thing that I'm thinking about. Me personally, I do think it would be best to wait for the task force to start that conversation before implementing that or suggesting that first bulletin. I do think the youth involvement is crucial. It's just we haven't started that conversation yet.
So the Dublin DEI advisory board, would that be an independent function, or is it going to be part of the community task force?
So the early conversation was this task force is only supposed to be a year. So our recommendation, what we've been sort of hinting at or talking about, is that there's going to be a long-standing advisory board to see everything we recommend play out in the long term. So that would be the purpose of the advisory board, pretty much turning the task force, which was something temporary, into something permanent, which will be like the
Got it.
advisory board.
Got it.
Kofi, I think your concerns regarding the fact that we haven't talked about the advisory board are legitimate. And they're ones that the youth have talked about, and they kind of understand that this is subject to change. Originally, they wanted 2 members from each high school. And we talked about it, and I brought Dana in to have a discussion. And if there's only 10 people on the task or on the future advisory board, then those 8 people would be the majority. So they understand that it's subject to change and that the numbers might change. But I think what they really wanted to get at, and Jamil's put it really well, is having some kind of formal body to inform the city of what the opinions and perspectives are of the youth, whether it be DEI, whether it be sustainability, any of those things, just a formal line of communication to city leadership, which could be accomplished through an advisory board. So if for whatever reason we can't get youth on that, it doesn't pan out, which I don't see that happening, to be honest, just from conversations that I've had. Ultimately, they're just looking for a way to talk to the city in a formal way. So maybe they're not a part of the the diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory board, but maybe then they make a youth task force or a youth committee that frequently meets and presents their perspectives to either the city manager or city council.
Hey, Kirby, can I just input here? At Tuesday night's community task force meeting, Jamil did review this with the task force at large. They seemed very on board with it, and just with bullet number 1, they really like the idea of having a representation from each school, and especially including the Emerald campus. So they were excited about this. So I just wanted, Kofi, I know you weren't able to be there the other night, so this has been put in front of them. Certainly we didn't finalize anything on Tuesday, but they seem to like the direction that this was going. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
Whether that's true or not, it is helpful. Thank you, Deidre. Kofi, your point is well taken that we need to tread lightly.
And I just checked the numbers. Dublin City Schools overall, probably right now, I just Googled online, so there were 17,000 students in 2017. Probably right now it's probably exceeding 20,000. So overall city of Dublin, we have 40,000 residents. So school population is pretty a big percentage of our community. So we definitely need to give the students population a voice. I think 4 positions seems to be reasonable to me. If it's 8, that might be a little bit too many, but yeah, this sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Unless you guys have any more thoughts, we should probably move forward just for the sake of time so that we can get some ideas going on some other aspirational goals. Any other closing thoughts on the youth? All right, this one's a big one. Reflective government and city practices. The city should create an interest in local government among diverse members of the community and recruit representatives of varying communities to participate in boards, council, commission, and academies. So this is what Beaverton has, and I won't read it. You guys could just skim through it very quickly, and then we'll have a discussion.
A lot of the things that I would recommend for this aspirational goal is pretty tied into the previous aspirational goal we talked about, not the youth one, but the one before that. When it comes to like programs and increasing exposure, I still think for this aspirational goal, to have a reflective government, it's you're going to have to increase the exposure of government to these groups. And, the program that we talked about is one great way. The one for the youth, the one for the adults. I think it's perfect.
Absolutely. And just a point that I wanted to make, the leadership development, the one that you were referencing, has these programs. And I find it interesting because the indicator is whether or not the city has these programs and has these resources. But then reflective government, these indicators are people actually then going and applying to be on boards and commissions? Are they filing for elected office? And is council or other boards and commissions therefore more reflective of city demographics? So you're absolutely right. They're hand in hand. One is evaluating the inputs, and I think this one is evaluating the outputs, the end game.
Hey, Kirby, what does BOLD stand for? BOLD.
It's similar to our Citizen University, but it's just Beaverton's. So they call it BOLD. Ours is Dublin Leadership Academy or the Citizen University, depending on where you take it.
Got it.
One's sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce and the other is the city.
I see. Thank you.
So do you feel that these 3 or 4 indicators are applicable to the city of Dublin? Do you like the way that Beaverton connects this to leadership? Or do you guys maybe want to take this a different direction?
So this includes the boards, commissions, public officials, elected offices in the last 2 bullet points, right? Then what about administration? Not necessarily they are elected. Let's say City of Dublin administration and staff. Shall we include something similar?
So I think that's where some of the confusion was during our task force meeting at large when we presented this category, because it kind of overlaps, right? We have an entire priority area that's just city practices. So it's just the organization and the demographics of the organization of the city of Dublin, which is where I think your point would layer in. However, this is speaking to the public engagement from council and boards and commissions. So I think you're absolutely right, but I'm not sure if it fits here or not. What do you guys think?
Can you repeat that one more time? What fits where?
So Vincent brought up the point that this section is specifically speaking to boards and commissions and council and appointed and members that run via elections. What about City of Dublin government leadership and staff? And the point that I made is that we have a priority area that is specifically focused on city practices as an organization. That's all the work that Homer has been doing and that Steve Francis has been assisting him in doing, trying to make staff more reflective of the community. So the point that I made is that this is more so speaking specifically to boards, commissions, and council and the public engagement process rather than city staff, which has its own priority area. However, I can see the argument for the other side. So I was wondering what your opinion was on that.
I feel like staff would still be affected by whatever exposure to reflective government that we do, because people looking to get involved in government, they might not be able to be elected the mayor within 2 years. But if that's a goal that they want to work towards, then they would start, they will start working towards being a part of the government, Dublin government, which isn't just the city manager. You have people behind Dana who are part of the government. I believe staff are still affected by what we talk about here for specifically reflective government. And also, I would like to add, I do not like the Beaverton this Beaverton outlay because they continually talk about we want to make sure it's reflective of our demographic. We want to make sure it's reflective of our demographic. I feel like that doesn't help Dublin when you have, let's say racial minorities make up 20% of Dublin. Having your government reflect this population size is not really useful in that situation. I think what Dublin needs is exposure to the government. So if we were to Dublinize this, I would recommend that we change pretty much, having a reflective city demographic, change it to increasing exposure to racial groups in Dublin. I think that's more effective.
So you're looking for equity in representation rather than reflective treatment.
Yeah, I would say that.
Vincent, Audrey, do you agree?
So actually, regarding this, how you phrase this, I had some conversations with my community leaders, and their point is, let's say Dublin, you have 20% minority groups, and they do not necessarily think we must have 20% minority people sitting on the city council or school board. Their point is, as long as the school board, the body, they can accommodate and also support the diversity, the diverse population, they are okay with that. So I guess Kofi was kind of pointing to that direction, and I guess we do not necessarily have to restrict ourselves to must mechanically have reflect our demographic, as long as we embrace diversity, we embrace inclusion to understand what different groups represent and what kind of needs they have. If we can serve those needs, we should be okay. Audrey, what's your perspective?
I agree with Vincent.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, Vincent. I think I agree with that. So not necessarily having to be like reflexive in membership of like who's on the board, but more like reflexive in understanding those groups and like, you know, having that that open mind and like knowledge of like the diversity in our community in order to properly like represent everybody. So yeah, kind of what you were saying.
Okay. Good people think alike.
So to confirm,
Julia?
you are more so speaking about diversity and engagement and truly understanding the community rather than there being some guideline to the diversity of the body of city council or a board and commission, correct?
Yes, as long as they support the diversity of the community, that should be fine. I guess we can loosen up the category here a little bit. I mean, the language here a little bit. Make it more, the language itself more inclusive of different ideas, right? Rather than just follow the demographic composition.
And Kofi, that's your perspective as well?
Yeah.
Okay. I will work on that and bring it back to you for our next meeting, which will be before the next task force meeting. So you'll have an opportunity to take a peek at that and make sure that it is within the guardrails of your perspective.
That sounds good.
All right, and let's move on to the next one. So now we're on to our community building and inclusion aspirational goals, which we only have 2. So we'll be able to get through this hopefully quickly because we're almost out of time. So first is committing to improve Dublin's inclusivity as a community. The city must commit to improving the community's inclusivity by providing its residents opportunities to engage in DEI trainings, conversations, and awareness campaigns. One of the big ones that we had talked about before and early on within our subcommittee is the development of an education or speaker series for the general public regarding topics of DEI and cultural awareness.
Off the top of my head, something that I would recommend for this to keep the city on track for this goal is one thing could be each year you want to set out a specific number of open DEI training for citizens. For example, each year you want to have 10 open sessions for the people. And then when it comes to education series, you want to have a specific number, not a specific number, but a minimum number. And you want to make sure it's reaching different groups of Dublin. I am looking forward to that.
I like the idea to have this DEI training, and like Kofi mentioned, the community members, and also maybe we can also add provide training to our officials and staff as well as an ongoing series. That would be helpful as well. That way, we community as a whole, we all are on the same page, speak the same language. Obviously, school, so we need to collaborate with the school as far as messaging, education, and also curriculum design as well.
Kofi, what if we extended your idea to also include town halls? So having a minimum number of check-ins with communities throughout the year.
Yeah, that sounds good. I forgot to elaborate on that. I was lumping town halls in with the education series.
I think it's a really good idea. So as you can see, Beaverton doesn't really have an aspirational goal that's similar to ours. But I think that this one, welcoming city, is relatively similar. What do you guys think about this specifically, speaking to developing allyship within a community? And since my highlighter didn't stay up, it's CB52. I don't understand their numbering scheme, but that's what it is.
I think that allyship's an important conversation to have, especially since I know for like some people growing up in Dublin and like who aren't a minority and like don't have much experiences like with like racial issues that like other people have to experience, like they may be uncomfortable like talking about it, or you know they don't know much about it. So you know, sparking those conversations about race and like allyship would be important so that they like know good ways to become, or like ways to be good allies to like their friends and like support other races basically.
Do you think that we should explicitly call it out within the commitment to improve Dublin's inclusivity?
I do not. I don't think the city should try and host something specific to allyship. I believe everything pertaining to allyship, becoming an ally, what is an ally, can be covered in a DEI open course, which we talked about. I am very hesitant on Dublin giving out the term allyship because it's a term that some people will put onto themselves and put themselves on a pedestal. I believe if people do want to be an ally, learn how to be an ally, they'll go through the proper DEI open courses that the city, will provide. I'm just really hesitant on Dublin, providing allyship tutorials, stuff like that. I just think that the DEI training and awareness stuff is it includes, it's encompassing of the allyship.
I completely get what you're saying. Would rather community members, my family, friends, go to implicit bias training and go to cultural exposure events and learn to be an ally naturally, rather than to go to a one-off course and get a certificate and wave it around like you've done the work. So I completely understand and empathize with what you're saying.
Yep, I agree. In general, you don't have to just say we are doing this for the sake of saying that. You can just do it. Basically include that as part of the different programs you are offering, and also the language just showed the city of Beaverton City. Probably they were written like a while back. We do not necessarily want to call out a certain race. Like for example, in their specific case, they said, oh, we need to include white people to engage with all the diversity conversations, right? We really need to encourage everybody, regardless if it is white or brown or black or Asian or other communities to engage. So if we have some language, we can encourage all diversity groups to engage in the conversation and the interaction. They do have a point here talking about welcoming immigrants. We do not necessarily have to have a welcome type of process or program to pertain to the immigrants. What we could do is we have some kind of practice to welcome all new residents to more like an orientation of what the city is about, and also the diversity, the culture, plurality here. So to show our welcoming attitude, and also to basically provide them some idea on what our community look like, make them like this transition easier. So maybe somehow we can include that in the slide, Dublin slide you had earlier, Kirby, or somewhere else.
Do you all think that there would be value in specifically welcoming immigrants or non-US born community members to the community when they move here? Or do you guys subscribe to Vincent's opinion of welcoming everybody and having classes available to everybody regardless of where they come from? Do you think there's value in targeting that specific demographic, or do you think that we should keep our aspirations broad? Theoretically, we could do both.
Yeah, so basically as you have overarching program, then you have like different classes. Let's say we have a class for Chinese speaking people. We have a class for Spanish speaking people. That you don't have to like make them all parallel. Could be like integrated approach.
It's a very good idea. Thank you, Vincent.
Sure. We'll look up to you to put something magic to include all these different ideas.
I'm good with words. You guys have the ideas. So we're over time by just a little. Let's hit this last slide very quickly just to get the wheels turning so that for our next meeting, we have an idea. Is that okay with everybody? Thumbs
Sure.
up? Okay. Promote Dublin's diversity. It is important that the city take active measures to acknowledge, appreciate, and uplift diversity within the community in a public setting whenever possible. Integrate cultural awareness celebration into city events. Acknowledge diversity in public spaces and communication material.
Something that Christine Ardekis said that was great was areas in Dublin that have high foot traffic. You know, you can add some type of cultural recognition there, whether it be in the rec or the bridge, something like that.
You guys have any other innovative ways to promote communities within the city of Dublin?
Yeah, city events, you talk about that. Okay. I was kind of thinking if you have certain events like when there's the memorial tournament, so there are so many people from out of town. How do we somehow send some message or put some communications for them to be able to appreciate our city's diversity? Probably we have some kind of marketing materials that may be part of the second bullet point and also part of the first bullet point. So assuming the communication material would include like print, press media, and also social media and the website and so forth, everything, right? All channels. What we can do, and we could also have certain, let's say, diversity ambassador, like seniors or adults or youth. They can be those kind of ambassadors and speaking or engaging with other communities as well. I'm just thinking out loud.
It's a good thought. So not hearing anything else, which is fine. We'll have a couple weeks to think about this. You all have the PowerPoint, so if you want to go back and think about it, review for next time. In 3 weeks, which will be, let me pull up the calendar real quick, the 13th, which will be right before our next community task force meeting. Let's try to get together. I will have language that expresses what we talked about today, put on a PowerPoint, and we can knock it down and build it back up the way that you guys want, and go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
A good plan.
Okay. Unless you all have anything else that you want to bring up, I want to thank you for engaging today. I think we had a really, really productive meeting, and thank you for staying over.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirby.
Yep.
Thank
take
you,
care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.